I woke up to voices in the room, sharp, cold, and full of irritation. It wasn't sadness I heard. It was something worse. My son's voice cut through the haze like a knife. "We're not even her real kids," he said, like he was talking about someone on the news, not the woman lying in this hospital bed. "Why should we take care of her?" Then came my daughter's voice, icy, distant. "I just hope she doesn't make it. It'd be easier. The estate's nearly ready anyway." Their words hit harder than the accident. I was groggy from the morphine, barely able to move. My arms felt heavy, like they were filled with sand. Tubes crisscrossed my chest. The machines around me beeped slowly, quietly keeping me alive. I couldn't open my mouth. Couldn't scream. But I heard them. Felt them near the foot of my bed. They were close enough to touch me, but they may as well have been strangers on a street. "She didn't even adopt us," my son said. "She just married Dad. We don't owe her anything." A nurse stepped in, trying to ease the tension. "Maybe you should step out," she said gently. "Whatever," my daughter muttered, her heels clicking as they walked away. I kept staring at the ceiling, pretending to still be unconscious. Pretending I hadn't just heard the kids I raised since they were little wish me dead, like I was nothing more than an old burden in their way. And then remembered Thanksgiving. I'd gotten up at 5 a.m. to make their favorite dishes, even baked. That pecan pie he always said he liked. She never showed. He came late and left early, mumbling about traffic. I made excuses for them back then. Not now. Not anymore. That car accident, it came out of nowhere. Or so I thought. Until now. The brakes had failed going downhill. No rain. No oil slick. Just a crash. Then nothing. And now here I was, wired up like some science experiment, hearing the two people I'd given my life to talk about me like I was already gone. I wanted to yell. To sit up and ask them who taught them to tie their shoes. Who held them when they cried after their dad died. Who gave up dreams and money and time just to make them feel safe and loved. But I didn't move. I just lay there. Still. Quiet. Because now I knew the truth. They weren't mine, not in the way I had hoped. Not when it mattered. They were my husband's kids by blood. Mine only when they needed something, dinner, a ride, comfort. But now, when I was the one who needed help, love, anything, they were already gone. Something inside me broke. Not with a loud crash, but with a soft, final snap, like a door locking from the inside. Let them think I was dying. Let them go. Because the woman they thought they could use, ignore, toss aside, she was gone. The woman waking up in her place? She wasn't going to play along anymore. Before all this, before the IVs, before their cold stares, I remember bedtime songs. And tiny sticky fingers gripping mine in the grocery store. I remember laughter. I remember the first time they called me Mama. My house used to be full of noise. A happy, messy kind of chaos. Shoes by the door. Half-empty cereal boxes. Backpacks dumped everywhere like someone else would clean up. And someone always did. Me. I never planned to be anyone's mother. I met Richard in my late 30s, already thinking that chapter of my life was closed. But he came with 2 little kids, a boy and a girl. Both scared. Both quiet. Their real mom had left them and flown off to start a new life far away. I wasn't legally their mom. There was no paperwork. No court order. Just 2 small hands tugging on my scarf that first cold winter and soft voices whispering Mama when nightmares kept them up. That was enough for me. Richard was a good man. Tired, but kind. He worked a lot and left most of the parenting to me. He never pushed for adoption. "It's just paperwork," he once said. "They know who loves them." Maybe that's where I got it wrong, thinking love would be enough. Looking back now, I see how I slowly disappeared in my own home. Not all at once, but little by little. I was folding their clothes, reading bedtime stories, but with every year, they saw me less and less. I got smaller. Richard died 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer. Quick and cruel. I found him myself, collapsed in the garden, hedge clippers still in his hand. The kids were in college by then. They rarely visited. Always too busy. Too far. And now, here I am. Alone. Hooked up to machines. Finally seeing everything clearly. At the funeral, they held on to me like they never wanted to let go. That was the last time I truly felt like I belonged to them. After that, everything started to fade. The phone calls got shorter. Then they turned into quick texts. And eventually, nothing at all. When they did come around, usually on holidays, they asked more about the will than they ever did about my health. Always polite. Always smiling. But only until they thought I couldn't hear them. I keep seeing my son standing at the foot of my hospital bed, arms folded like he was studying a contract, deciding whether I was worth the effort. His face didn't show an ounce of care. "She's not our real mom," he said. That one sentence told me everything. They weren't mourning. They were waiting, like wolves circling the last breath. And all this time, I fooled myself. I thought maybe I was just being sensitive. That growing up had pulled them away, not a lack of love. But now I see it clearly. They loved the meals I cooked. They loved the roof over their heads. They loved the safety and comfort I gave. But they didn't love me. Not like I loved them. That kind of truth doesn't come loud or angry. It comes heavy. Quiet. It doesn't yell, it sinks. But it also sets you free. Because if love wasn't enough to hold them close, then guilt sure won't keep me bound to them either. Let them whisper. Let them plan. Let them think they've already won. What they don't know is that I rewrote everything 2 months ago. The house they're counting on? It's not theirs anymore. And the woman they thought would go quietly? She's gone. The one waking up now is different. They don't know what a forgotten woman can do when all she's got left is a pen, some time, and nothing left to lose. I couldn't move much in that hospital bed, but my mind was wide awake. One blink at the ceiling tiles, and I was back in the kitchen, paper plate in hand, watching them chase each other around the table with peanut butter on their cheeks. Back when they were small. Back when my daughter used to curl into my lap like she wanted to melt into me. Back when my son hid his face in my coat and whispered, "Don't leave yet." And I didn't. I stayed. Even when their mother vanished. Without a word. Even when Richard, their father, started coming home late and handing me receipts for things I never asked for, saying, "They're yours now too." I took it all on. I stayed through everything: tantrums, teenage silence, sullen dinners, broken hearts, braces, birthdays, missing teeth. I was always there, smiling through it all, even when the teachers at school called me stepmom like I was a stranger. I nodded like it didn't sting. They never knew I cried in the laundry room, holding their tiny socks, wondering how love could make a person feel so full and so invisible at the same time. And now? Now I was just some woman in a hospital bed, taking up space. I still remember the last time either of them said, "I love you." It was thrown out casually, like a, "see you later." I held on to it for weeks, trying to believe it was real. But now I know it wasn't. It was just habit, like brushing your teeth. After Richard died, they stopped calling as much. I thought it was grief. It wasn't. They had already taken what they needed: his name, his money, the image of a family. I was just a leftover. The woman who knew where the tax files were. I stopped trying a year ago, just to see if they'd notice. They didn't. No birthday messages. No, thinking of you, Mama. Not even a, "Did you eat today?" Nothing. That silence told me everything. So I started remembering, not the fantasy I clung to, but the truth. The eye rolls every time I said no. The way my son locked drawers after I asked if he was okay. Financially. I remembered overhearing them whispering last December when I offered to help with my daughter's car. "She's loaded," she hissed, thinking I was asleep. "She just wants to use it to control us." They made kindness sound like a trap. Made me sound like a threat. And still, I baked the pecan pie. Still, I hoped. But love isn't a boomerang. You don't toss it out and expect it to come back just because you want it to. Sometimes it lands in the dirt and just stays there, ignored. Now, lying in that cold, sterile bed with machines instead of laughter, I realized something: I wasn't completely alone. There was something with me, anger. Not wild, screaming anger. Something quieter. Steadier. A sharp kind of calm that comes when you finally accept the truth. No one's coming to save me. But I don't need saving anymore. But to someone who had seen it too many times, it looked like a warning. That was the moment I realized he wasn't checking in out of love. He was circling. Waiting. Counting. And I wasn't imagining it, Grace had seen it too. You, maybe. You're the only one who ever really saw me. The only one who never forgot who I was beneath the quiet routines and the giving and the years of being the one everyone leaned on. They forgot, but I didn't. And more importantly, I still had time. 2 months ago, I sat in a beige leather chair across from a man named Russell Kim. Younger than I expected, sharp suit, neat sleeves, the kind of man who looked like he ironed his shirts every morning and didn't cry at movies. "Most people only change their wills when something big happens," he said, pen tapping the desk. I just nodded. Something had happened. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No betrayal with fireworks. Just a sound. A laugh. I was walking down the hall with a basket of fresh towels, heading to my daughter's old room. They were visiting for the weekend. I paused outside the living room when I heard my son's voice, loud and carefree: "Just give it a couple more years. She'll croak, and we'll split the house." Then my daughter snorted. "Bet she leaves it to a cat or some library out of spite." And they laughed together, like it was a joke, like I wasn't real. I stood there frozen, towels in hand, and felt something go cold inside me. That laugh, that careless joke, snapped. The last thread of the story I'd been telling myself for years. They didn't love me. They were just waiting. So I went to Russell. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I just handed him the old will, the house deed, the life insurance policy, my life on paper. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a single photo. Me and April. Taken in April, oddly enough. She was 6 then, all sticky fingers and wide eyes. Her mom had passed and I took her in for half a year while her father tried to get sober. She called me her backup mama. She's 32 now. Married. Works at a women's shelter not far from my old church. Still sends me handwritten letters that smell like citrus and always signs them, still your girl. Love, April. Russell looked at the photo and asked, You want her listed? No, I said. I want her to have everything. He blinked. Everything? Yes. The house, the savings, the stocks, the pearl earrings I only wore twice but kept safe all these years. All of it. I didn't flinch. I had made peace with it already. Love might not follow bloodlines, but cruelty sure knows how to. Stay in the family. I wasn't about to leave my life's work to people who looked me in the eye while I limped through grief and still found time to wonder what I was worth on paper. Russell didn't ask questions. He just typed. By the time I left, the new documents were signed, sealed, and stored. The old ones shredded. My instructions were clear: if April couldn't be found within 30 days, everything would go to the local shelter. Not a dime to either of them. Think they'll contest it? I asked. Russell smiled. Only if they enjoy wasting money. They'll lose. Good, I thought. Let them try. I never told them. I let them keep planning. Let them glance around my house, mentally pricing the furniture. Let them whisper about timelines and death certificates. Let them laugh. Because now, I was smiling too. Not out of revenge, not from spite, but from the peace that comes when you have nothing left to prove and everything left to protect. I didn't need them to love me anymore. I just needed them to know they didn't break me. Grace lived across the street, long before the kids could even reach the doorknob. She wasn't nosy, just present. The kind of neighbor who noticed when a porch light stayed off too long or when your mail piled up. She was the first person I told after Richard died. I still remember her standing in my kitchen, holding a bag of lemons and ginger, her voice soft. They'll look to you now, she said, nodding toward the hallway. But you have to look after yourself too. Back then, I thought she meant grief. I didn't realize she saw it all unraveling before I did. She noticed when my son started stopping by more often, always with an excuse. Just checking the furnace, he'd say. Or, making sure the back gate's locked. But he never stayed long. He went straight to the mail slot, flipping through the envelopes like a man on a scavenger hunt. Grace watched it all. One afternoon, over tea, she said, He doesn't act like a son. He acts like an auditor. I laughed. It sounded bitter. Maybe he's both. Then came the morning he casually asked me about the house deed. Smiling that practiced smile, Richard's smile, the one that looked sweet to strangers but meant something else entirely to me. Hey, he said, you still got that paperwork from when Dad put the house in your name? I can help you organize. If you want. Make things easier. Easier, for who? That was when I knew for certain, they weren't coming back to me. Not really. They weren't here for love. They were here for the leftovers. But I'm not leftovers. I was the whole meal. The cook, the caretaker, the heartbeat of a home they only remembered when it was convenient. Now, finally, I was done waiting. I had saved enough of myself to stand back up, if only in my mind. They could laugh. They could count. But they wouldn't win. Because the woman they forgot? She remembered everything. It always felt like he had an agenda, like there was something he wasn't saying out loud. I told him I'd think about it, and 5 minutes later, he was gone. That evening, Grace sent me a text, saw him driving around your mailbox again. After he left. Took a photo just in case. Want me to keep watch? I didn't reply, not right away. But that night, I left the porch light on for her, just like we used to when the kids were scared of thunder. She knew what it meant. After that, Grace started keeping track of everything. Every time his car showed up without warning. Every time her Ring camera caught him standing by my fence, never knocking. She called it just in case, but we both knew better. Then one afternoon, my daughter showed up. I was out back trimming the roses when she leaned over the fence, smiling like nothing was wrong. Hey, she said sweetly. Just wondering if the mortgage stuff ever gets too much, I can help. Take it off your hands. I looked at her, surprised. I own the house. It's paid off. Oh, right, she laughed awkwardly. I forgot. But still, Dad always said I was the organized one. That wasn't what Richard used to say. Not even close. She left with a quick hug. No warmth in it. The next day Grace called again. She came by too, she said. Sat in her car for 20 minutes before coming up. Thought you should know. I'll write it down. That's when it hit me. I'd never told Grace what I heard in the hospital. I didn't tell her I changed my will. I didn't say a word about slowly pulling myself out from under all of it. But somehow, she knew. She saw what I didn't want to admit, that my own kids weren't checking in to help me. They were circling, like vultures. And Grace, without asking, had made herself my witness. I never asked her to. But in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not this time. The nurses thought I was asleep. I'd gotten good at that, lying still, breathing slow, eyes shut, listening. People say all kinds of things when they think you're unconscious. It had been 2 weeks since the crash. Everyone kept calling it an accident. Maybe a deer ran out. Maybe the road was slick. Maybe the brakes were just old. All neat little excuses. But I remembered something very different. Not the crash itself, but the quiet. The kind of silence that tells you something should have worked, but didn't. When I hit the brakes, there was nothing. Just a dull, hollow sound. No resistance. No response. I knew that feeling. It was the sound of something meant to protect me, giving up. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Grief messes with your head. Makes you question your gut. But then, the memories started piecing themselves together. Like the time my son took my keys. I'll go check the tire pressure for you, Mom, he said, all casual. He didn't ask, just took them and walked out like everything I owned was already his. And my daughter? She borrowed my car the week before. Said hers was out of gas. When she brought it back, the mirrors were off, the seat shoved so far forward I could barely get in. I brushed it off as thoughtless. Now, I wasn't so sure. There had been a soft click that morning when I started the car. Not loud, just enough to give me goosebumps. The kind of sound you forget, until you're lying in a hospital bed with nothing but time and questions. So I did what I've always done. I watched. I listened. And when they finally came to visit, after the crash, they didn't ask a single thing about the accident. Not one question about the car, or what happened, or if I was okay. Just this, so, what happens if you can't live alone anymore? That's when I knew. They weren't afraid I might die. They were afraid I'd survive. I kept still, watching the nurses come and go. One of them, Clara, was different. She moved slow, on purpose. The kind of person who notices things. One afternoon, she checked my vitals, then stood quietly at the foot of my bed. You're aware, aren't you? She asked, gently. I didn't move. Just gave the smallest nod. She leaned in a little closer. Then maybe it's time to let someone else be aware too. That night, I reached out and tapped 3 fingers. Lightly against her palm. It was all I could manage. Her eyes widened just a bit. The next morning, a man showed up. No clipboard, no stethoscope. Just a navy windbreaker and quiet shoes. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets. Clara came in, looked at me, and said one word, visitor. He gave me a small nod. Name's Elliot, he said. You hired me once. During your divorce. Remember? I blinked slowly. I remembered. Clara saw the look in my eyes and took it as a yes. She gave me a gentle smile and said, you can't talk yet, and that's okay. I'm pretty good at understanding silence. Then Elliot, quiet and steady, opened a folder and slid out a photo. It showed my car sitting in a tow yard, zoomed in close on the brake line. He tapped the picture. This was cut, he said. Clean, straight through. Someone tried to make it look like old damage, but it's fresh. This was no accident. And right then, I didn't feel afraid. I felt relief. Because now it wasn't just a gut feeling, it was real. It was proof. Elliot leaned in closer, his voice low. I've already pulled security footage from the hospital and your street. I've got a contact in traffic surveillance. We'll find out who did this. You just focus on getting stronger. Then he gave me a crooked smile, like he knew I wasn't supposed to be awake. Hell of a family you've got, he muttered. No, I wanted to say. Not family. Not anymore. My body still didn't work the way I wanted, but Clara understood me better than anyone. We created our own language. 3 taps meant yes. 1 slow drag across her palm meant get. Elliot. A soft blink followed by a closed fist? Don't let them in. She never questioned it. Just nodded, like she'd already chosen her side. That's the thing about people who've lived through real pain, they don't wait for permission to do the right thing. Elliot came every other day, always during the busy lunch shift when no one was paying attention to the quiet woman in room 219. I didn't need words. He'd lay out photos like pieces of a puzzle on the little tray by my bed. One showed my daughter's car in my driveway the night before the crash. Timestamped at 11:14 p.m. She told me she was out of town. Another photo showed my son in the hospital lounge while I was unconscious, logging into Wi-Fi and opening a document titled Advanced Directive Template. He didn't even bother to hide it. Smart, Elliot said, tapping the folder where my new will was kept. Changing the beneficiaries was your best move. I already filed a certified copy. Even if they destroy the original, it won't matter. I blinked twice, our way of saying thank you. Then came the hard part. I need your signature, he said gently. Just one. Then we can file for legal protection, elder endangerment. If they try anything else, it becomes a felony. Clara waited for night shift, when the lights were low and the halls were quiet. She rolled in a clipboard with just one form clipped at the top. My hand trembled, but I signed. It barely looked like a name, but it was enough. Enough to start a paper trail. Enough to say, I'm still here. I'm not as helpless as you think. The next morning, my son showed up. Wearing a black polo and a fake look of concern, he held a cheap bouquet of daisies, the kind from a gas station. Hey, Ma, he said, like he hadn't called me a burden just weeks before. You're looking good. Thought these might cheer up the place. I didn't move. Didn't smile. He sat anyway, launching into a monologue about real estate values and how maybe it was time to start thinking seriously about your options. I kept myself calm by counting the freckles on his arm. Then he leaned in a little, lowered his voice. Me and Aaron were talking, we'd take good care of the house, you know. You don't have to worry about taxes or maintenance anymore. That's why he came. Not to check on me. Not to ask if I was okay. Just to size up the walls he already thought belonged to him. He didn't notice Clara slip in behind him. Didn't see her quietly unplug the small audio recorder from under my bed. After he left, she whispered, "You did great," and tucked the recorder into her pocket. He just gave us everything we need. And for the first time since I opened my eyes in that room, I let myself hope. Hope for a life beyond the machines, beyond the silence. A life that was mine again. Not something to be taken or planned. Around or erased, they thought I was asleep. They thought I was done. But I was just getting started. They came back wearing black, he in a suit that looked like it hadn't been dry cleaned since their father's funeral, and she in a wrinkled blouse that looked expensive but worn, like she couldn't be bothered to care too much. And I just watched. Her mascara was smudged just enough to sell the performance, the grieving daughter act. But they were too late. 4 days too late. They walked into the hospital lobby like they owned it, not even a single question between them. Just the assumption that everything would be ready, the nurse would hand over a folder, and they'd sign whatever papers needed signing, all while pretending to be heartbroken. What they didn't know was that I had left the night before. Not walking, not yet, but in a wheelchair, wrapped in a navy quilt Grace had sewn herself. Clara rolled me out the back, quiet and smooth, to a private car Elliot had arranged. One signature. One forged discharge from a sympathetic doctor. I slipped out of the hospital like a woman leaving her own funeral. Because that's what it was, to them. They came to mourn a woman they thought was already gone. But they weren't mourning. They were drooling. A young nurse in light blue scrubs met them at the front desk. "Room 219, my daughter asked, sweet and soft. "We're here to collect her things. And talk about next steps." The nurse typed on her keyboard, her brow pinching slightly. "Room 219 was discharged last night. Everything's already been taken care of." "Taken care of," my son echoed, voice cracking just a little, right where guilt should have been. "By who?" She didn't say. Just added, "All the arrangements were made in advance. Her lawyer sent everything." "Lawyer," my daughter blinked. The nurse nodded and handed them a flat manila envelope. No return address. No kindness. Just a cold wait. They tore it open right there in the hallway, their fingers twitchy with greed, their faces still trying to hold it together. Inside was my letter. "You always assumed I wouldn't outlast your patience. You were wrong. You always assumed silence meant permission. It didn't. I know everything. And I left you nothing. No signature. No affection. Just one final line, I may have raised you, but I no longer claim you." I underlined it once in blue ink. Witnesses said she dropped the letter. He bent to pick it up, but not before others saw it. Not before a passing nurse paused, looked away quickly, like someone who just watched a skyscraper collapse in slow motion. They didn't leave right away. They argued. First in whispers, then louder. Blaming each other. Saying things like, "You were supposed to double-check the brakes," and "You said she wouldn't make it." The same brakes they swore were just bad luck, the same crash they were sure I wouldn't survive. The same story they thought no one would question. But I was watching them, from Grace's attic window, 2 houses down and 3 feet higher. Propped up with pillows, tea in a travel mug, listening through the vent Grace had cracked open for me on purpose. She sat beside me, knitting slowly. You sure you want to stay for this part? She asked. I didn't answer. I needed to see it. I needed to watch the exact moment they realized they hadn't just lost the house, they'd lost me. Not the fragile woman in a hospital bed. Me. The one with the pen. The one who left before they even bothered to say goodbye. They pulled up to my house like it still belonged to them. Her Lexus was crooked in the driveway, his truck idling behind it like he was afraid someone might steal his spot. They barely stopped the engine before jumping out. He ran straight to the front door, jiggling the knob like it might just give in if he shook it hard enough. It didn't. Deadbolt held. The porch was different now. The lockbox was new. And next to the doorbell was a shiny brass plaque that read, "This property is under legal review. Access restricted. For inquiries, contact Kim and Associates." He stared at it like it had stabbed him in the chest. She circled to the back, calling his name like it was a house fire. It's locked. Everything's locked. Of course it was. I made sure of it. Russell's firm had sent out a property manager that very morning. He met them in the driveway, clipboard in hand, suit pressed, face unreadable. "I'm here on behalf of Miss Albright," he said. They blinked. "She's alive?" my daughter asked, like I was some ghost that ruined her weekend. "Very much," he said, flipping the page. "And quite lucid. Would you like me to read her message aloud?" They didn't answer. So he read it anyway. Effective immediately. This property is no longer within your legal access or interest. Do not attempt entry. Any trespassing will be reported. A copy of the new deed has been mailed to your last known address. You are not listed. Since the kids didn't come back for a while, the manager handed them an envelope, thick, heavy, and made of the same fancy cream paper I always used. My son took it like someone getting a parking ticket he didn't think he deserved. My daughter didn't even touch it. She just stood there, arms crossed, quietly chewing the inside of her cheek like maybe that would stop the shame from showing on her face. The manager gave them a small nod, got in his car, and left. And there they were, two grown kids dressed in black for a funeral, standing in my driveway with nowhere to go and nothing to claim. They ended up sitting in that driveway for nearly an hour. At first, they argued. Then, they just sat in silence. Eventually, she opened the envelope. I watched the whole thing from the attic window, one floor up and across the fence. Grace was beside me with a warm mug of cocoa in her lap and that same sharp, knitted judgment she always wore like a shawl. My daughter read the letter 3 times. Her lips moved like she was whispering the words out loud. Then she suddenly threw it, hard, like it had burned her hand. I knew exactly which part hit her. "You never once called me Mom when no one was watching." My son didn't say a word. He just pulled out his phone and turned his back to her, pacing while he made a call, right in front of the flower beds I once planted myself. Funny enough, the roses looked better than they had in years. Grace smiled at that, watching the whole scene unfold like it was a play. "You really think they thought you'd be waiting?" she asked. I whispered. "They thought I'd die the same way I lived with them, quietly." But quiet doesn't mean weak. And this time, the silence belonged to me. Inside the house, everything was still in place. But none of it was theirs anymore. Not the couch they used to fight over when they were 12. Not the old photo albums in the hallway. Not even the fridge magnets they gave me one Mother's Day. They came here to take something. Instead, they found out. Something had been taken from them, their sense of ownership, their control, their easy access. And now, for the first time, they stood outside my home like strangers, locked out, just like they had once locked me out of their lives. The arguing started again, low at first. Just the sound of raised voices drifting up to the attic. Then, bam, the car door slammed. The mask dropped. "You said she wouldn't change it," he snapped. "She wouldn't have, if you hadn't been so obvious," she shot back, pacing by the mailbox like it owed her answers. "Do you think she didn't hear you in the hospital? You're the one who said we should hurry things along." "I never said sabotage the car, you idiot." And that was it. The truth spilled out. Not because they were sorry, but because they were scared. He backed away, breathing fast, raking his hands through his hair like maybe that would help make sense of it all. "You're the one who checked her mail every week," he hissed. "You practically lived at her fence. And you're the one who brought up power of attorney at her birthday dinner. Jesus, Nathan, could you be more obvious?" Grace raised her eyebrows at that. "So, he ruins birthdays and breaks trust," she muttered. I didn't laugh, but I did grip my mug a little tighter. Below us, they kept unraveling. "She was supposed to leave us the house," he yelled, voice cracking. "She raised us," he added desperately. "No," my daughter said, voice flat as ice. "She raised you. I always knew she wasn't really our mother." That stopped him cold. He looked at her like he didn't know her, or maybe like he finally did. And yet, there she was, just as broke and furious as he was. "Don't you dare," she said sharply. He pointed at the letter still crumpled in her hand. "You told me she'd never change it. That she was too sentimental. That she still saw us as her babies." "Well," she muttered, eyes looking anywhere but at him, "I guess she finally saw us for what we are." The silence that followed was the worst of it. No tears, no apologies. Just the heavy, awful quiet of two people who built their lives on top of someone else's grave, and were shocked when the ground gave out beneath them. He got in his truck first and drove off fast, tires screeching like he thought he could outrun the mess they'd made. She stayed a little longer, digging around in her purse like maybe she'd find a checkbook or some magic fix. Eventually, she gave up and sat down on my steps. She lit a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have and just stared at the door. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But for the first time, I saw it on her face, loss. Not just of the house, but of me. It was never just about the money, it was about the story my daughter had told herself for years. She believed that no matter how far she drifted or how badly things went, she could always come home. That I'd be there waiting. Still her mom. Still hers. But that story ended the moment she left the cigarette on my front step and walked away. I watched her go until she disappeared around the hedge line, hedges I once planted with their father. When we still believed families could grow strong if you just gave them enough sunshine and time. Grace sat beside me in the attic, quiet for a while. Then she turned to me and asked, "You ready for what comes next?" I took a slow sip of tea and said, "They started this. I'm just finishing it." Because what they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that I had everything: proof, witnesses, and a private investigator who didn't sleep. When I walked into Russell's office that morning with Elliot and a folder thick enough to make even a seasoned lawyer blink, the receptionist hadn't even arrived yet. We sat in a glass conference room overlooking the city, all that sky and metal reflecting back a version of myself I hadn't seen in years, steady, upright, not scared anymore. Russell opened the folder slowly, spreading the papers out like it was a courtroom. "I'll need to verify all of it," he said, already scanning through it. "But from what I'm seeing, this isn't just carelessness, it's conspiracy." Elliot nodded. "I've got timestamps. Hospital cameras. Car shop inspections. It all lines up." I leaned in. "So what happens now?" Russell looked serious. "First, we file for a protective order, immediate. If they so much as step on the property again, they're in violation. Second, we take it to the state attorney. And third, if you want, we go public." I sat back for a moment, thinking. It wasn't about headlines. It was about justice, finally. Real consequences for all the ways they'd twisted the truth, for turning me into some kind of walking ATM with a pulse. "They don't get to bury me alive," I said softly. "And they don't get to walk away like none of it ever happened." Russell's eyes paused on one of the photos, clear as day, the brake line sliced clean through. "No," he said. "They don't." Then he slid one last document toward me, the letter I'd asked him to prepare weeks ago. It was addressed to the district attorney, notarized, signed, sealed. I read it over one more time, then picked up the pen and signed without shaking. "I, Margaret Albright, hereby submit formal testimony and supporting evidence for charges of attempted vehicular harm, financial fraud, and elder endangerment against Nathan Albright and Aaron Graves." Russell sealed it in a black envelope. "We'll send this out within the hour," he said. Elliot handed me one more thing, a USB drive. It held the footage from the porch. They didn't know the house next door still had cameras. That was Grace's idea. She installed them years ago when her nephew broke into her shed and never took them down. "People get bold when they think no one's watching," she'd said. Now those cameras were the final nail in their coffin. I walked out of that office with copies of everything. Not because I needed more revenge, but because I had finally learned something: silence only works when you've got the receipts. And I did. Later that day, I sat in a rented cottage tucked into the hills, about 3 hours away. The air smelled like pine trees and peace. No neighbors. No kids. No noise. Just me, a lawyer on call, a PI on retainer, and a brand new future, one where no one could take what was mine again. When the letters reached their doors, one for each of them, I didn't need to be there to see it. Elliot told me my son went pale before even opening it. My daughter called twice that night. I didn't answer. I was too busy recording something more important. My face looked calm and steady in the camera. I spoke clearly. "My name is Margaret Albright. If you're watching this, it means the last lie has fallen." Then I reached for the flash drive and hit upload. I wasn't hiding anymore. I left behind just a teacup, 2 framed photos, and an old cardigan that still smelled like rosemary. Everything else, I either took with me or burned. Disappearing isn't what the movies make it look like. It's not hopping a train in the dark with a scarf over your head. It's paperwork. Notarized copies. A cold, final choice written in black ink. I was done. And Russell? He took care of the rest, including the legal name change. Because from now on, they won't even know who to look for. I changed everything, my name, my ID, even my address, under a protective clause meant for people hurt by their own families. It wasn't easy. But once the evidence became part of the public record, not a single judge hesitated. New identity. New license. Everything sealed. Elliot handled the rest. He sold the house quietly, transferred it into a trust, and then passed it on to the new owner, for exactly $1. That new owner? April. My goddaughter. The one my kids used to laugh at. They said she was just a phase when I took her in for 6 months after her mom died. But April kept writing to me even after she got married. She called me Mama Mar long after my own children stopped calling me anything at all. She cried when she got the call, not because of the house, but because I trusted her with it. I'll take care of it, she said, her voice shaking. You already do, I whispered back. Then I hung up. Because goodbyes are for people who might return. I had no plans to come back. At dawn, I took a slow train. No ID needed, just a ticket, some cash, and a window seat where the sun poured in soft and golden like quiet forgiveness. Nobody looked at me twice, which was exactly what I wanted. Somewhere after the 4th station, we crossed a river. I turned off my phone and dropped it into the water. Just one ripple. No signal. No trace. By noon, I was gone. I arrived at a tiny town no one really talks about. A cluster of little homes tucked deep in the forest, built for women like me. Not victims. Not runaways. Survivors. They call it second bloom. There's a wooden sign at the entrance, hand-painted and a little cracked from the weather. It says, "You are not what they did." I stood there for a while. Then I walked in. That's where I met Rosa, 63, a former school principal whose own son forged her name on 5 loan papers. And Margaret, not me, another one, 74, who walked away from her house with nothing but a purse full of receipts and no apology from the man she buried alone. We don't share our stories right away. We garden. We plant tomatoes. We write things down we may never send. And slowly, we start healing, with our own names. The day after I arrived, the letters were sent. To the state. To the press. To everyone. Left in Richard's old address book, the same people who once told me how wonderful my kids were, who used to whisper at funerals, "Why haven't they called more?" They know the truth now. Elliot confirmed they were both served. He even sent me a photo. My daughter, being led out of her office in handcuffs, head down. My son, a few hours later, taken from his condo by 2 officers in plain clothes. They tried to blame each other, of course. But the recordings, the break line photos, the emails, my signed statements, all of it told the same story. They meant to hurt me. And now? Now they were the ones being erased. The police didn't knock. At first. They watched my son's condo for 3 days to make sure he didn't pack a bag or vanish into one of those sketchy Vegas hotels he'd been calling real estate opportunities. Nathan didn't notice. He was too busy leaving panicked voicemails for his sister. Don't say anything. They don't have proof. We'll tell them she was confused. Sick. If you talk, we're both going down. Too late. The knock came at 6:12 a.m. on a Wednesday, before the world wakes up, before there's time to lie. 2 detectives. 2 badges. 1 warrant. Nathan opened the door shirtless, blinking like the law had never applied to him before. They read him his rights while he reached for his phone. He didn't fight, not at first. Just kept repeating, "Wait, what?" Like confusion could erase the evidence. My daughter was arrested 3 hours later at work. She was wearing heels and a smile when they came in. Tried to duck into a meeting room. They followed her in. Her assistant, a young intern named Mia, called. Elliot later to say, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just said, "This can't be happening." But it was. For once, the consequences were real. No more silence for them to hide behind. No more mother to clean up their mess. No more home to come back to. There was a time I wanted to hide, just like kids playing pretend, hoping the truth would go away. If we didn't answer the knock. But it came anyway. Elliot sent me the videos of their arrests, not because I asked, but because he believed I had the right to see them. In those clips, I watched the moment the power drained from their bodies. And what I saw in their eyes wasn't guilt, it was shock. They honestly couldn't believe I had the strength to fight back. They expected me to quietly fade away, clutching old photos, whispering, "But I raised you," while they picked apart everything I'd built like scavengers at a feast. But I didn't fade away. I wrote everything down. I made plans. I waited. And now it was them standing under those harsh, bright lights, answering to the world. The headlines came fast, within a day. Siblings arrested in alleged attempted harm of stepmother over estate. Police release shocking audio and email evidence. The story went viral. Not because I was famous, but because people get it, they understand what happens to quiet women who survive. We're rarely believed until the damage is too big to ignore. Soon, my inbox at the sanctuary filled up with messages. Women from all over. Women like me, not real moms, overlooked names. On paperwork, nearly forgotten in their own homes. One woman wrote, "They used me like a shelf. Just something to hold them up until they didn't need me anymore. Thank you for reminding me that love without respect is just manipulation dressed up nice." I wrote her back, "Being alone is better than being used." That same day, Grace called me. Her voice sounded lighter, younger, like she'd let go of something heavy. "They came by," she said. "Reporters. Sitting out front like stray dogs, waiting for a quote." "What? Did you tell them?" I asked. She laughed. "I told them the truth. I said she was quiet, not stupid. You just never saw how sharp a woman becomes after she's been cut too many times." I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because the tears were long gone. They'd already turned into ink, on police reports, court forms, signatures. That brought justice. The press conference wasn't even my idea. It was April's. She called me 3 days after the news broke. Her voice was strong, but I could tell she was nervous, like she was stepping into something big. "They're calling you a sad, old woman," she said. "One headline even called you a tragic recluse taken advantage of by your stepchildren. But they're getting it wrong." I didn't answer right away. I'd spent my whole life avoiding that word, tragic. I fed children I didn't give birth to. I paid bills no one thanked me for. I stayed quiet while being insulted, just because. The words were wrapped in fake kindness. I'd been tired. I'd been used. But never sad. April took a breath. "Let me talk to them. Let me tell the truth." And I told her, "If you do, don't defend me. Speak for the women who still can't." She promised. The press conference took place in the garden. My garden. The one they never helped with, the one they always complained about, but I kept planting in anyway, because beauty doesn't need permission to exist. April stood there in a navy dress, wearing no makeup, but full of quiet strength. Behind her was a large board with a sketch of the house. It was newly renamed the Albright House, a home for women rebuilding their lives after family betrayal. The reporters leaned in. One woman in the back gripped her notebook like it might catch fire. April held up my last will and testament, sealed in a clear folder. "This was signed 6 weeks before the incident," she said. "It leaves the house to be turned into a sanctuary for women over 50 who've been hurt, emotionally or financially, by their own families." Someone yelled out, "Was this revenge?" April didn't even blink. "No. This is taking back what was hers." Cameras flashed. She went on, "The media keeps calling this a family tragedy. But this isn't about money. This is about 2 people who thought they had the right to use a woman's love against her, just because she once made their lunches." She paused. She raised them. She dressed them. She cried in silence so they wouldn't feel her pain. And when she finally asked for peace, they tried to erase her. It got quiet, so quiet even the wind stopped. Then April stepped closer to the microphone and said, "This house will never again belong to people who saw love as a deal to cash in on. It belongs to women who were told they didn't matter because their names weren't on a birth certificate. Women who gave everything they had, and got silence, or suspicion, or worse, in return." And in that moment, even the soft murmur of the crowd felt like a thank you. April stepped forward, moving through the crowd. "This place," she said, "will have 10 beds, a garden, a legal help office, and, most importantly, it will have dignity. Because love without respect isn't love at all. And too many women have been tricked into thinking they should feel lucky just to be tolerated." At first, the applause started slow, from the left side. Then it spread to the center. Then everywhere. It wasn't wild or loud, but it was real. Honest. She stepped back, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. I was sitting 3 towns away, tucked in the corner of a quiet library, watching it all unfold on a borrowed laptop. I saw April lift her chin and smile, just a small smile. Not for the cameras. Not for show. Just steady. Strong. The kind of smile I used to wear when I still believed I had to be the one who held everything together. That house was never truly theirs. It was always a seed. And now, finally, it was blooming. The trial hadn't even started yet, but their punishment had already begun. The first to go were their partners. Nathan's girlfriend, Jenna, the one who used to call me Mama Mags, while scrolling through Instagram at dinner, packed her things 2 days after his arrest. She didn't leave a note. Just changed her number and sent one message through Elliot, "Tell Margaret the first one believed her." Erin's husband didn't say a word. He just froze their shared bank accounts the second the news hit. He worked in finance, he knew a sinking ship when he saw one. The courts were slow, but the world moved fast. Clients disapparaient. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors who once waved now turned their backs. They weren't just suspects anymore. They were known. Every group chat? Gone. Invitations? Revoked. No one wanted to be seen with the ones who tried to harm the woman who raised them over hardwood floors and old family dishes. It was almost funny. The same people who used to beg me to give them another chance vanished the moment the mess hit the news. Nathan tried to post something vague online. Family stuff is complicated. You don't know the whole story. But the comments hit hard. You cut her brakes, Nathan. Tell us which part we don't know. You owe every woman you've ever smiled at an apology. His account was gone by the end of the day. Erin took a different approach, tried to play the victim. She did one interview with a gossip site. A soft-lit video where she said, "I don't know how it got so twisted. I loved her. She was like a mother to me." But the video didn't get sympathy. Because it cut to the letter I wrote, the one that ended with, "You never once called me mom when no one else was listening." That line hit people. It stuck. And when her old coworkers started leaking emails, ones where she called me the maid who thinks she's a matriarch, any remaining pity dried up fast. Turns out, people do pay attention when the quiet woman finally speaks. And when that woman has proof, they listen even harder. Grace called me again. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "I saw her yesterday," she said. "Erin. At the pharmacy." She looked thinner. Hollow. "Guilt'll do that," I replied. Grace didn't agree. "It's not guilt. It's emptiness. Because they didn't just lose the house. They lost their version of me, the obedient one. The one who cleaned their messes, smiled through the pain, and was just grateful to be included. Without me there to hold it up, that fantasy collapsed. And when they looked around, they finally saw what I always knew: no one saw them as victims. Not anymore. That's the thing about betrayal. People think they can clean up the mess once the smoke clears. But no one trusts someone who turned on family, even if the family wasn't by blood. Even if it was me. Now they sit alone, in separate cells, waiting for their next court date. Their lawyers are court-appointed. Their pleas for mercy? Laughed at. And me? I'm sitting on a porch 3 towns away, drinking tea with Rosa. Watching the sunset spill across the hills like a soft, slow apology. We don't talk about them anymore. Not because we're afraid. But because they don't matter. I did love them, once. Now? They're just names on a court file. And I'm the headline they'll never outrun.